Brilliant. Great. Okay. So it's probably helpful if we do some introductions to begin with. So thank you ever so much for giving up your time to be with us today. Ahmed, would you mind starting and introducing yourself and telling us about the journey that you've been on over the last 15 years or so?
Yes. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Makda. I'm hoping I can share my screen. I'm hoping it will record on your recording. So I'll try. Never tried it on Google, so just bear with me 1 second. Technology, yeah. Bear with me 1 minute.
It should give you permissions to present. Does it give you an option down at the bottom?
I'm just trying. 1 second.
Yeah, there we go. Brilliant. Thank you.
You can see that. Hopefully it'll come up in big screen shortly.
Perfect. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So, as I said, Ahmed Makda. I'll just quickly go through sort of my journey, really, through education and into work. So yeah, a lot of people say I don't look my age, but I'm in my 40s.
No way. No, you don't.
So went to secondary school. I had a great enthusiasm for chemistry. It was something which I took particularly interest in, especially when my chemistry teacher in year 9 did this really cool science experiment, and I was taken aback, and I thought, this is what I wanted to do. So I came out of school, didn't achieve the best of grades, sadly, but still went on to further education. So I went to college, took science as an opportunity to sort of progress that ambition and that interest that was piqued in school. But as well as that, restart some of my GCSEs, which I didn't get the adequate grades in. So I studied GNVQ stroke BTEC science right up to advanced level. But whilst I was doing that, I also did some part-time jobs. And I think the key thing here, what I would say, is that within the working environment, you do need experience. And I would strongly suggest and recommend, actually, that when you are as the school cohort are looking to go into the working environment, employers do look for experience of any sort, things like teamworking, communication skills, whatnot. So moving on from further education, I went on to university, and you would probably argue as to why I took a bit of a sidestep, because as you can see, I did a degree in information technology. So the reason why that was is because then in college, I thought to myself, well, am I going to be able to get a job in science or in a particular sort of industry in the local area? And looking at the opportunities at that time, there wasn't any. So I always had an interest in IT, computers and whatnot. So I explored opportunities there for jobs, and I saw a plethora of jobs, and I thought, well, technology is never going to go away. So that's what I pursued. So graduated from Manchester University in Manchester, did a degree in IT. Whilst I was doing my degree in IT, I still held down some part-time jobs. Again, can't emphasize how key that is, just earning a bit of income, but as well as working in that team environment and whatnot. But whilst I was whilst I was studying, I also had a part-time job at a car phone warehouse, selling mobile phones part-time. And whenever I could, I used to do more hours, making more money. And that's where I landed my first proper job in my career. I worked in the IT department, so an internal move. Thankfully, I was very lucky for that, and I'm grateful to this day for having that opportunity. So that's where my career started off, really. Moving on from there, a lot of our jobs were outsourced offshore, which does happen because companies tend to want to save money and costs. So we were outsourced to IBM. We were there for a while before sadly being made redundant. And then moving on to Computer Sciences Corporation, which is an organisation which isn't heard of a lot, but it's on par with the IBM of this world, for example. So Computer Sciences Corporation doesn't exist anymore as an organisation. It's called DXC. It merged with Hewlett Packard Enterprise Businesses. So it's an American organisation, and I was working on the NHS account there, and I was working in the Chorley office there. So moving on from there, I then went on to work for Vodafone, which was previously cable and wireless. So Vodafone was the mobile side, but I used to work on the telecommunication landline. So as you can see within the broadband marketplace in the UK, Vodafone offer a broadband service, and the reason why that is today is because they brought out what was called cable and wireless, and so I was employed by cable and wireless, but then we were moved over to Vodafone because Vodafone as a business had bought cable and wireless as an organisation. So moving on from there, worked at Skipton Building Society for about a year or so before moving on to Arqiva, which is the smart metering. So that's the water meters and gas and electric meters which are being installed across the country. So worked on that. Left that job to work again locally at BAE Systems for a short while before moving on to Access Pay, which is a fintech startup company in the centre of Manchester. And currently I'm working for central government in DWP Digital, that's the Department for Work and Pensions within their digital arm. DWP Digital is going through the biggest digital transformation program in the whole of Europe, anywhere, whether that's public sector or the private sector. And along with my work commitments, I've also managed to sort of finish now a trainee non-executive director traineeship, call it like, in the third sector. I'm also a school governor at my kids' school. So I suppose that's me really in a nutshell. That's my journey of 15 years, and hopefully, if my health keeps well, then no reason why I can't be working for another 20 odd plus years or whatnot. But thank you very much.
Thank you so much for sharing that journey. There's loads of questions from students that are really directly relevant to some of the experience you've had. And I remember cycling past some of those BAE Systems sites when I worked in Chorley. So it's nice to be able to visualise where you've been working. So thank you for sharing. That's really kind. If it's okay for you to go next, Mark. Have you got
That's fine, yeah.
Fab.
Wonderful. So, I've had a bit of a journey as well through different career paths. So I started out at secondary school in Sheffield, where I did very standard GCSEs up until I did the normal courses. When I got to GCSE level, I decided I wanted to try something different. So I did geology as an option, which is slightly left field, and then from geology, I continued that trend on to try different subjects at A-level. I'd not done law, economics or business either, or accountancy, so I did those for A-level. So I explored with my education slightly when I was growing up, trying to understand what I enjoyed, what I liked. I think that's really important to try new things, get involved in different subjects, what you don't have opportunities to do. So I actually quite enjoyed economics and accountancy, so I did accounting and financial management at university, and did a placement year where I actually worked as an accountant for a year, which was a really good degree option. If you do get a chance to look at sandwich course when you go to university, it's a great option to get great year experience, like an internship for a year. Normally some big companies, I worked at a large insurance company for a year. When I realised I didn't like working in offices behind Excel spreadsheets, at that point I went back to university for my final year and thought, what do I want to do when I finish? And so I went down I want to be a teacher. My parents were teachers. I fell into an easy trap of doing what my parents did, and I went in and did teaching, and I actually really do enjoy teaching. And I did that for 2 years when I finished. Unfortunately, I didn't get a permanent role at that point, and I got an opportunity to work for, from contacts what I already had. My brother was working for a company in the games industry, and he actually worked for a company called Aardvark Swift, who are one of the largest games industry recruiters. I worked there for 6 years, helping graduates get their first job in the industry, which included graduate programmers, artists, designers, and production staff. So there's lots of options to get into the games industry, which is and when I first started out in that area, it was just starting to really get big in the UK. It's actually now a multi-billion-pound industry for the UK. There's opportunities at studios like Rockstar, Sony, Microsoft, all have their own studios in the UK. So I think when parents, probably 10, 15 years ago, if I told my parents I was going to work at Rockstar on Grand Theft Auto, they didn't think it was a real career. Whereas actually, now, if you actually talk about the games industry, becoming a programmer, being a computer scientist, it's a fantastic opportunity to develop and get into a growing industry. I worked in there for 6 years, and then because I seem to like change, I went back to teaching just because I loved it. I do actually love working with children, and I moved home. I moved over towards Selby, and I worked last year at Selby High School, and I did lots of maths, and I also worked as outreach with some college students as well. But unfortunately, COVID hit, and unfortunately, my contract ended in September, and I've actually gone back into the games industry because I absolutely love it. I'm now working with some big developers in the UK and Europe to find not really graduate jobs this time. So previously I worked helping graduates find their first jobs, mainly programmers, because there's a lot more programming jobs in the UK than there is any other area in the games industry, especially at graduate level. But now I am working with more senior producers, project managers in the UK, in Europe, and internationally. So that's my career journey. I'm happy to answer any questions, or what I would probably suggest is trying to hopefully provide links with industry contacts and programmers, and be able to be a bit of a soundboard to help get feedback as well for anyone who's got any questions or work with companies in the area. So.
Brilliant, thank you, Mark. It's fascinating for me to hear that transition into teaching, out of teaching, back into teaching, and the crossover with STEM industries. So you'll be you won't be surprised to hear that there's a lot of students who are interested in a career in the games industry. So I look forward to passing on some of those questions in a mo.
Wonderful, that'd be great.
And then Kevin, thank you ever so much for joining us. Would you mind talking us through? You've got 20 years experience in industry with some really exciting careers throughout that time.
Yeah.
Thank you. Would you mind giving us an overview?
Yeah. Okay. I've never been a teacher. I've never really seen the calling to go down that line. That seems like a lot of hard work. So in terms of myself, I think Ahmed talked earlier about the balance between education and also experience.
Yeah.
So I've had after finishing school, I guess I've had 3 different opportunities to build on my education. So I have a bachelor's degree in software engineering that I did around about normal sort of age 19 to 23. I came back, I did a master's degree in information security in my early 30s, and then did an MBA, a Master's of Business Administration, a few years after that in my early 40s. And I think that sort of evolution from software engineering into security and then more into business has sort of in part driven and also in part reflected where I've gone with my career path. So I've had a whole range of different roles. I did do a little bit in the games industry. I developed software around laboratory management systems and testing them on huge, big old computers that don't exist anymore. I've worked in banking, in finance. I've worked with huge organisations like Experian, global payment processing organisations based just around the corner from Fulford School, that are dealing with credit cards and debit cards for more than 1 billion people worldwide. There's many of these organisations that we just don't see out there that are absolutely huge, employing tens and tens of thousands of people, where technology is absolutely key to them, and they're supporting much of the fabric of society, whether it's from a government perspective to industry, finance, education. So there's so many different opportunities. So last 20 years I've specialised in information security, or what's more recently become cyber security, which is, for me, is an absolutely fascinating field. It's almost endless, and it's kind of at once subsuming and being subsumed by the rest of technology and computing, because it's all pervasive. One of the things I really, really like in that is the need to keep developing oneself, going back, developing, whether it's formal education, through degree programs, informal education, just through picking up certifications, learning, sessions like this. I think of all the different areas of technology that I've worked in, I think does probably the best in terms of recognising and delivering on the need for both gender diversity and neurodiversity. And there are a huge number of people out there in the cybersecurity industry who've really found their place. They're in various different challenges, I guess, from a neurodiversity perspective. And there are so many opportunities out there, because the skills, the approach, the attitude as well that they bring to the discipline is just phenomenal. The ability for some of them to absorb so much information, be able to make sense of it, really focus very, very deeply in things. And then for others, you can take the sort of more business-focused route, like I have, which, yes, it's still in the cybersecurity space, but dealing with clients, with contractors, with contracts, with global change initiatives in massive organisations, quite far removed from the technology. So I personally find it a really, really fascinating place to be in. It's very energising, and there's so much to learn. And of course, in the last few years, and particularly in the last few weeks, government have been getting more and more involved in this. And the recent government reviews about the UK's defensive and offensive cybersecurity capability. So there's so many opportunities in the government space for really, really technical people to get involved and use some really, really cool kit and support the country in ways that we probably can't talk about in open forums.
Yeah.
So very, 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 very much enjoy the variety of options and the variety of people who can work in the field.
It's really exciting to hear about that, Oliver. Thank you. Sorry, Kevin. I get so confused by the titles at the bottom. And it's fascinating to hear three completely different stories. And, I cycled past one of the companies that you mentioned on the way to the Millennium Bridge, and I had no idea what they did. And I think that's one of the big issues in school. Education is so all-encompassing that it's so hard for us teachers to have up-to-date careers advice, which is why I really appreciate you taking the time to talk me through. Ahmed, you raised your hand. Did you want to ask Kevin a question?
Not more of a question, just to follow up really from what Kevin said. I mean, because presumably this is obviously for the North's audience and maybe wider, but just early this week, I think the government had announced that they're going to bring so many hundreds or jobs of cybersecurity in the North, and these are GCHQ national security jobs. So
yeah, it's a national priority, isn't it? And it's trying to bridge the gap between students who don't really understand why they're learning maths and how the computing stuff that they're learning can be applied in the real world to the national need that we've got. And I loved, Kevin, when you said that you're still learning now, and my job as a teacher is to encourage students to break out of this idea that we learn to pass exams, and to get them to think about the opportunities that they can contribute to, the things that they can enjoy, the stuff that they want to be and do in the future. So it's really exciting. Like Mark, both of my parents were teachers, but unlike Mark, mine said, don't touch it with a barge pole. We'll support you with whatever you want to do. Just don't go into teaching. Don't do it. And I resisted for a long time. My background, I trained as in electronic and computer systems engineering, and always wanted to be an engineer. Well, that was when I discovered, a career as a dinosaur or a Roman soldier wasn't really an option anymore. But really wanted to be something to do with hardware or software. I wasn't quite sure which, but then volunteered whilst I was at university and schools, and I just love it. Every now and then I flirt with the idea of moving into industry, but I'd miss the interaction with students so much. I just think it's a wonderful opportunity. So if it's okay with you, I'll share some slides which you might have seen before, which is gives a bit of background and context to why I think it's so important to get your voice into school. And then I'll show you the questions from my students. I'll probably suggest which one of you it's aimed at, but if the other two want to chip in, that'd be really helpful too. So let's have a look. These are some slides from a contact at the DFE. And it's based on some research that was carried out last year, so just before the pandemic. Let's have a look. And I'll just move this onto another screen so I can still see you, in case it all goes horribly wrong. So can you give me a nod? Can you see that pupil, parents and carers survey? Yeah, great, fab, thank you. Okay, so there was a survey that went out to over 2,000 pupils and parents in a variety of different colleges. So it's supposed to give an overview of a national picture. It wasn't every school, it wasn't every family, but it was a substantial piece of research by the DFE. And some of the findings were pretty damning for the subject that I've given the last 15 years of my life to. So students were asked to rate which subjects they most wanted to do, and computer science or computing was one of the lowest in popularity compared to the other optional subjects. Students said that they didn't particularly enjoy studying computing. I love computing and I hope my students enjoy my lessons, but nationally there's this understanding that computing isn't fulfilling all of the things that students want to get out of a lesson. We have a huge gender divide. I don't think that comes to a surprise to any of us, and computer science particularly seems to appeal more to boys than girls. Parents value the subject more than the students themselves did. So the parents were saying this is a worthwhile subject to do, but the students just didn't see it as much. But I think this is the big one. Students themselves and teachers, although that didn't come through in this survey, didn't really know what careers all of the topics that we were being taught and they were being taught linked to. So a bit of background, a bit of history. I don't know how much you know. In 2014, there was a change from ICT to computing, I think as a bit of a backlash from schools gaming the system to try and get GCSE equivalent qualifications. So it was really easy for students to spend a couple of weeks solidly studying and then pass all of the practical skills to come up with the equivalent of 2 GCSEs. I never taught those qualifications. I didn't like it, but it happened nationally and there was a backlash to stop that from happening. There was also, alongside that, a push to try and move away from just a skills-based curriculum to computer science to meet the skills shortage. And I think we've seen a number of headlines. There's one on the BBC yesterday and a few days before that in The Guardian about a huge digital literacy skills gap. So whilst the transition over to computing and computer science is really welcome, actually computing, the subject I teach, covers 3 subjects. There's computer science, there's digital literacy, and there's information technology. And I think sometimes we lose the breadth of that aspect. Ahmed, you said you wanted to come in after this slide. Do you want to chip in?
Yeah, you've mentioned there that children don't see the value, particularly of a career within computing. But I think, if we just have a mobile phone and every mobile phone has apps. So if I can dumb it down to relate it to students, kids these days, they have Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram. It's technology which drives this. It's technology which drives the use of your social media. From the moment you register your details, that goes into an IT system. Your username, your password, that is administered by some engineers to make sure that your service is up and running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If that service goes down, engagement, as one of the other speakers said, about engaging with customers, with organizations, about adverts, businesses. This is all tech, so to really sort of talk to you in the 21st century in 2021, you just need to have this in your hand, and that's IT basically.
Yeah, I completely agree that the number of applications is just huge. I think the problem is trying to have the right balance of covering theory to get students qualifications and to get through a curriculum, but then also being able to dip into such a rich range of application. So that's really, I think we're all in agreement. We see the value, but somehow that value hasn't yet been transferred to students. Sadly, when asked which subject students should do, only 23% of pupils said that they wanted to do computer science. And then actually, if you look at the stats, last year I think it was only about 13% of all of the students who took an English GCSE also took computer science. So there's about a fifth of students wanted to take it, and then about half of those students actually chose to, because it contracted, it's not always possible to do all of the subjects that they want to do. They're in option blocks alongside other things. So they're also a bit undecided. So perhaps students don't understand what computer science is, which comes back to a point that I'll make a few times. I think intervention needs to happen at Key Stage 3, year 7, 8 and 9, which for people outside education, that's age 11, 12, 13. There's a lot of research that shows the gender gap isn't an issue so much at upper primary school. I don't know, Kevin, if your son agrees with that, but computing is seen as things for boys, for girls, for people of every nationality and background. But then at Key Stage 3, that's where the division happens, which perhaps isn't all that surprising. Lots of things biologically happen around that kind of time. But if we were to have a intervention that could make the biggest impact on our national economy, it needs to happen when students are aged 11 or 12, when they're deciding their options. Again, these slides are really damning. It's really depressing. But it's not just from my school. This is a national picture. Students said that they would take it if they enjoyed it, but they're not currently enjoying Key Stage 3 computing as it stands. We know there's a gender gap. Actually, the ethnicity gap isn't quite as severe, although this research just kind of clumped everyone into a big BAME bracket, and there's some huge differences within that bracket, so I don't think it's helpful to dwell on that slide all that much. The main one that I think is worthwhile having a look at, parents, we said, do recommend computer science, and a lot of parents are working in something IT related, as you said before. So parents recommend it, and we want students to listen to that. And then this is the one that I think we can make a big impact on. So how much do you know about the types of jobs and careers? Well, actually, out of all of the STEM subjects, whilst the parents knew a little bit, half of parents knew about computer science related jobs, out of all of the STEM disciplines, it's computer science that the students know the least about. So we can make a huge impact if we can educate students as to what computer science is, what are the benefits, how enjoyable it can be, and what career pathways it links to. And then the last one, here we go. So the largest proportion of students said that they didn't know anything at all about careers in computer science. So that's when I saw these slides, I thought we've got to do something about this. I want to make sure my students know what computer science involves, know that computer science can be for them, and that there is a huge range of computer science jobs. It's not just programming jobs. It's not just being stuck in an office in front of a computer screen. There are jobs that are exciting that involve those, but it's much, much, much broader. I think there was a question a moment ago. Did somebody pop a question up before? Anyone want to follow up on any of these?
It was myself, really. I just thought about, obviously the key age group you mentioned is the 11 to 13.
Yeah, that's right.
And I've just pulled up the computing curriculum. How many of the students actually take computing? Does every student do it at Fulford at 11 to 13?
Yeah, good question. It's an optional subject. So we have, I should work out the stats. Nationally, it's about 13%. Our numbers have gone down for the next year due to a variety of different reasons. Computer science is part of this English baccalaureate. So it was put in an option block so that you had to do either a foreign language or computer science. So this current year, in year 10, we've got a really high proportion of students who've chosen to do it. We've got 3 classes, about 75 students out of a year group of about 200. So under half, but promising numbers and a good, we've been really trying to recruit more girls into it, but it's very heavily dominated by boys, as sadly is the case in most schools. This next year, we've actually gone down to 2 classes rather than 3 classes because of a change in the option blocks. The students who have chosen it are much more keen to do it. They're choosing it because they want to do it rather than because they don't want to do one of the other subjects in the same option block. So that will be a really interesting. I'm going to find it fascinating.
How do they touch computer science or computing in previous years to be able to get that sort of that taste for it? Is there do they do it in like year 7 to 9 in any other lessons, or how does that come in?
Yeah, great question. So at Fulfords we have an hour a week, 2 hours a fortnight in year 7, 8 and 9. And we changed relatively recently from having Key Stage 3 in just year 7 and year 8 to expanding Key Stage 3 in year 7, 8 and 9. So students are choosing their options in year 9 at the moment. So all students will have done 3 years, an hour per week. We find the number of skills and the depth of coverage at primary schools is hugely varied. Sometimes we get students who've never used a mouse and a keyboard before. We have to spend a long time teaching students, what a file is, how to organize files and folders. Some students have done loads and loads of game design in Scratch and nothing else. Some have done lots of PowerPoint presentation skills, some group work, some collaboration. Some do loads, and some have done very, very little. It all depends which primary school they've come from. And I'm not blaming primary schools at all. Primary schools have a huge amount of pressure, and primary school teachers have to be an expert in everything. So it can be a real challenge. The people who are leading on computing in primary, their priority is computing, but underneath priorities of literacy and numeracy and everything else. So it's hard to make it a priority at Key Stage 2, but we do have specialists teaching it at Key Stage 3. And we've had some really exciting interventions to try and get students passionate about it. So the fact that I'm running it today probably gives a hint as to how much I want to challenge all of those things that were on the previous slides.
Lastly, Peter, just because I didn't know, have you been made aware of the BBC microbit? Platform? Because they are using it at Selby, and I know there's been a lot of funding and push from Microsoft and other groups to create educational sort of opportunities. So it's hardware and software based, so you do get like quite a nice range of opportunities to program, but also to create and to become like technologists and to really get hands-on, which might make it a bit more fun. I didn't know if you used that much at all. So.
Yeah, no, thank you for raising it. We do a lot with microbits. In fact, Red Nose Day, I programmed a little microbit to go in my mask, so if I nodded my head, it would just flash. But for any teachers watching this afterwards, there are loads of really exciting opportunities that you can get involved with that leads to free kits or free resources or extra support or extra funding. So I'll share a list of those after this session. But thanks for flagging that up, Mark. So if it's okay with the three of you, I've compiled a list of questions. So at the end of each topic, we get students to do a homework. They rate their confidence in all the skills that they've done. We do a little test. We do a bit of dedicated improvement reflection time where they have an opportunity to go off on a bit of a tangent related to one of the skills that they want to learn, and do a bit of careers research. So Evelyn in year 7 would love to get involved in digital animation. And I wondered if, Mark, you'd be willing to take this question. What skills do you need to make animations? How do you get involved in the animation industry, either for games or for video effects?
Well, it comes under the art and animation group of technical skills, and they use packages like 3ds Max, Adobe Suite for 2D, so you can do illustration and 2D. You can use a lot of the Adobe products. Animation wise, a lot of it is done in like rigging, character animation. You've done in like 3ds Max and Maya, and then nowadays as well, a lot of opportunities in like film as well, and they're using software like Houdini and Nuke, and the part of the like Foundry group of software tools. I mean, there's so much on YouTube nowadays.
Yeah.
So what I would say is, as youngsters, as kids under 16, or even right the way up until you're finishing university, you can access these products from their website as a young user. You can download their software packages. You can do basic, follow YouTube videos about basic rigging and basic animation. You can try creating your own. There's so many opportunities nowadays to sort of make use of it, and then to try it and see if you like it, and then hopefully go on to a university which is renowned for doing really well. And that, I mean, there's like University of Hertfordshire, University of Teesside, which have fantastic art and animation courses for film and games.
Brilliant, thank you, Mark. I've got a couple of friends and colleagues who get involved with 3D AMI and do some summer schools or some after-school clubs with Blender, so free versions of the software that you mentioned. So that's really, really helpful. I'll pass that on to Evelyn. Thank you, Mark. So Seb would like to be a games designer, and he's fascinated by the graphics particularly involved in games. So possibly aimed at you as well, Mark, this one. How do they make games so realistic? But if Kevin and Ahmed, you want to chip in with any insights into the technology behind this as well. But we'll start with Mark, please.
So game design is an interesting term because lots of kids want to be game designers.
Yeah.
And what I always recommend with game designers is it's great to want to create games from scratch and do all the sort of ideas of games. But when you come to how many jobs there are, a game designer, there tends to be one or two in a studio, and they come up with all the ideas, and they're quite senior roles. Whereas actually, the people who make the games are the programmers, the artists, the people who do all the, like you said, the programming, the actual 3D graphics. So it's so complicated to make games nowadays.
Yeah.
Because they're so realistic. It's really that in the films industry. It's amazing how like real time 3D, how visually brilliant they are. I mean, they're like if you even look at the latest Star Wars movie, where they made Marcus Hamill younger again, but did it in real time, and it was amazing. So, in terms of how do you make games, you can make games yourself, like really simple games using BBC Microbit using Python, etc. But how to make a big game, it becomes a lot more complicated. So, but
So the things to take away. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, sorry.
Things to take away for Seb then, would you say start small and make something simple, but then don't be overwhelmed by having to do everything yourself. You'll be working in a team and get the support, so there'll be a lot to delegate elsewhere.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and if you really find the passion for a certain area in games, like really follow it up, because I mean, a lot of the areas are what are roles and careers. There's like programming, there's tools programmers, graphics programmers, gameplay programmers, engine programmers. That it's quite tailored and very sort of. They're all experts in their fields, and there's opportunity to really dive deep into programming or art. There's character artists, environment artists, prop artists, animators, etc. So really do your research and find out what you really love and have passion for.
Fab. Thank you, Mark. Do you think there's any crossover between those, or do you think people choose and specialise early? Having worked as a recruiter, do you see people with lots of crossover skills? Or...
in terms of programmers, if when they go to university, they do computer science courses which do object-oriented design, do a lot of C++ programming, and low-level programming. If you look for degrees which have strong C++ usage from day one in year one, they do better in games industry jobs. At that point, once you're good at C++, you tend to do your dissertation on the topic you're interested in.
Okay.
So some people will do graphics and lighting and do a lot of physics, like programming, looking at like flames, water, etc. Some people like to do the gameplay and will work hard in Unity and make more elements to the game. So it just depends. You'll get a feel for it if you're on the right course and you put yourself in the right opportunities. You'll probably by the end of your degree start specialising. And there is opportunity to move in and out of areas, but they are quite specialist roles nowadays, even at graduate level.
Fab, thank you. That's really helpful. I'll move on if that's okay. We might come back to a games design question a little bit later. In a nutshell, for Ben, who wants to get involved in niche educational games design, how can he get started? What advice would you give to Ben?
Is that me again?
Yeah, please, if that's okay, Mark.
Yeah. So, niche game design. So, in terms of games in what way do you mean by niche game design?
So he wants, for his job research, he found a job that you can just make educational games. So things to support primary school students, secondary school students, or any stage in education.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of opportunities in like VR and AR at the minute. In terms of making games, making opportunities, making experiences. Like scientific games, which are used in all sorts of industries rather than just in games. So, like they call them serious games as well. So there is a move for example, like for the companies like who might have the RAF, who need to train pilots, they need to make a simulator, which then becomes very much a game as such, but a real life game. It's really realistic. You are looking at creating something which is lifelike and serious. These can be used in lots of different industries. So, I mean, in terms of, again, it's something you probably choose to find a job in after you've done university. There is some serious games courses, but I would really focus on getting a really good A-level understanding of maths, physics, further maths, a computer science, if that's available, which it is nowadays. A lot of schools are doing computer science or computing. Those are like the really key areas to get into good computer science universities at Russell Group. So you can look at Russell Group universities, red brick universities really do look at the course content.
Yeah.
A lot of Russell Group universities sometimes do Java orientated lessons, but if you're looking for games specifically, they tend to use C++ rather than Java. Other industries use Java,
Yeah.
but it's just for games they tend to use a lot of the engines are wrote in C++ and C,
Yeah.
really low level and fast,
Yeah.
because games hardware, even PS5, is not as good as the best up-to-date PC.
Yeah.
But these games have to look the best they can look.
Yeah. So it's about squeezing the maximum amount of
on
performance.
not the best hardware. So
Fab.
they have to be really fast and really quick software. So the programmers, you're going to be competing with people from rocket scientists, really, taking them away from industries like NASA and stuff. So
brilliant. Thank you, Mark. That's really helpful. So moving on to data science. So Ahmed, I don't know if you want to contribute to this one. So in some of the roles where you were involved collecting data, what kind of data have you collected? How have you processed it? So Kevin or Ahmed, I don't know which of you would like to go first on this.
So I can chip in.
Fab.
It's interesting, really, isn't it? All these games question because of the age groups, and they're all probably on their consoles and whatnot. But so that was a good theme, but good of you, Mark, to tackle those questions. Wasn't it? It's good job you were there. Data scientist. So no, I've not personally held any data scientist roles, but I have worked with people or colleagues who've worked with what's called data warehouses. So data warehouse essentially is like a dump of information. It's stored, it's in databases. It's called a warehouse. It's not a warehouse in a physical warehouse. It's more of a computer.
Yeah.
And what this is basically name, addresses. So Zara, to answer your question, if I was to give you an example, if your mum and dad have a Tesco club card, for example, and your mum and dad, they would have Tesco would have their name, address, telephone number, email address, and any other information which they use to register when they've signed up for the club card. And every single time that your mum and dad do their shopping, they have their club card scanned, and that information and whatever purchase was made under that receipt is stored with Tesco to say, Mr. and Mrs. Zara, I'm sure, I don't know what your surname is or what, but let's just say if it's Mr. Smith or Mrs. Smith, Tesco would know that Mr. and Mrs. Smith purchased these items. And what they then do is within tech, what they have is they can then do specialist marketing to target certain products and offers from Tesco to your mum and dad, because they can see from a historical trend that they have purchased, I don't know, dog food or cat food or alcohol or something. So they can target specific offers to your mum and dad because they can see that every week they shop and they buy this amount. That's just from your shopping. If we were to take at Tesco, for example, your vouchers, sometimes they give you discount vouchers, and they can say, well, they might buy Warburton's bread every so often or whatnot, and they can say, come on, if next time you come shopping, here's a voucher of 50p off your next loaf of bread, for example. So data is all about collection of information. There's ethical standards here as well, where how much information companies collect. I mean, I'm probably going to go into too much, but Facebook was recently done because of Cambridge Analytica, and that was political and all that sort of stuff. So there's benefits of data collection, and there's negative side of data collection. In terms of the scientist element, I do work with a data scientist. I don't know what their job is particularly because it's quite niche. But it is about analyzing data, extracting data, working with that data, how systems work with that data and whatnot, and how to make certain systems become more savvy with information. So when you log onto a website, what information. So for example, another example I can quickly give you is Amazon. When you go shopping on Amazon, whatever you've looked at previously, they'll be able to see that you've logged on again, and we've got that same item that you previously looked at, and it's discounted now, and they'll put that on your main page to pop it up to say you were interested in it before. Would you want to buy it again because now it's discounted, for example?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's sort of what I can say in terms of that. I mean, it's quite vast and varied, so I couldn't really pinpoint it. But
No,
yeah,
thank you. That's
Kevin,
really helpful.
anything else?
We introduced a data science topic for the first time in computing this year for year 9, and we're just trying to demystify, to take it out of this creepy magic where Amazon knows what you want to buy before you buy it, to the opportunities for charities and businesses and educations and governments to be much more informed about the decisions that they make and more profitable in what they do. So thank you. That's really, really helpful. I'm going to keep it moving if that's okay, because there's a couple of questions I'd really like to pick Kevin's brains on. So Olivia is really interested in a career in cybersecurity. So Kevin, could you answer or cast any light on what people in cybersecurity do, what kind of salary Olivia could expect if that's a role she wants to pursue?
Yeah. Okay, so what do I do? So I've kind of specialised within cybersecurity, me personally, in, I guess, cybersecurity leadership roles. So I'm not the most technical person, but we have lots and lots of technical people who just lead me for dead. We have data scientists, we have analysts, we have programmers, developers, all sorts of different people. So I found myself generally in a leadership role. There's probably as many roles as you can think of, and suitable for all sorts of different types of people. People who are very, very deeply analytical, to people who want to go out and sell and evangelize. Interesting, some of the earlier conversations about games, and there's a huge push within the cybersecurity industry for learning through gamification, and very, very specialist, very much in that education space. What's the salary? I probably won't go into my own specific.
No, fair enough. Sorry, personal
salary,
question.
but the salaries can be very, very significant. At the top end of it, if you're leading a security function in a FTSE 100 company, then you can be looking up towards 300,000 or 400,000 per year, right. Plus bonuses and incentives and so on. There are many people earning an awful lot more than that. The starting salaries can be pretty healthy as well. There's a huge intake program at the moment across apprenticeships. A lot of organisations are offering apprenticeships, and they're offering 30,000, 40,000 starting salaries for people coming in with the right sort of qualifications and right attitude. So yeah, the salaries can be very healthy. I think as well as salaries, and it's going off the point a little bit, I think as much as anything, the variety, if you look at the whole package that the kind of career can offer you. Personally, I've worked in many different places. I worked in the US, Hong Kong, Singapore, Australia, UK, and I know lots and lots of people who travel extensively and work in different places as well. So there's all those kinds of aspects as well as just purely salary.
Brilliant, thank you. That's a really helpful answer. We've probably got time for one more question, if that's okay. So perhaps aimed at Kevin as well. Eleanor is interested in a job in cryptography and cybersecurity. You mentioned careers being really varied. Is there anything else that you'd suggest is the best thing about your job?
Specifically in cryptography, or
if you've got experience in cryptography or the broader field of cybersecurity.
I've some experience in cryptography. I studied that at master's level. It's fascinating. I think one of the things that really grabs me is it's absolutely everywhere. We wouldn't be able to do this today without cryptography. The phones, it wouldn't be there. I think it's such a fascinating field, and there's so much public information out there. One of the principles is we make everything public, and if we keep it our cryptography secret, then we're defeating the point. We want to make it public and have people pull it apart. So there's so many different routes into it. There are challenges that maybe the school, as children get older, beyond year 8, 9, 10, can take part in various GCHQ run initiatives around cryptography. Maths is obviously essential for it, an aptitude for maths, for data science. Some of the people that I've worked with who are specialists in cryptography have been very much from data science perspective, and they will gather vast amounts of data and just look for those little nuggets that just make a difference. It's such an absolutely fascinating field, and it's much more pervasive than most people realise. I certainly very much I'm more of a user, an exploiter of cryptography than working in that space. But I know people have then gone on and specialised into things like blockchain off the back of it. So it's an ever growing field, and very, very interesting. And I suspect it's going to grow and grow and grow. There's going to be more and more need for it as it underpins more of what we do.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kevin. There's loads more questions that I'd love to ask, but I don't want to take up loads of your time. So I really appreciate you taking the time to go for this. There was one from Georgia about ethical hacking, about what that involves. Do any of you have any experience in penetration testing or ethical hacking? How people do that? What kind of things that involves?
Yeah. Is this to get into it or to?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned some exciting competitions and quizzes. The one from HQ. I don't know if you want to give any more details about that, or.
Yeah, there's a couple of sites, which I believe both free. One's called Try Hack Me, and the other one is Hack the Box, and there are many others, and they're really good. You can go on and just play. I think the one of the space of what's called ethical hacking or penetration testing has kind of developed into two fields, what we call the red team and the blue team, the attackers and the defenders.
Yeah.
And the skill sets are very much interchangeable, and there's a huge need for both. Large organisations, whether the government, private sector, are bringing in more and more specialists. They're actually finding it very, very difficult to retain people because the specialist consultancy organisations who sell themselves out, they're just paying astronomical salaries, just through the roof. So your regular company is really, really struggling. It's a great field to work in. You can pretty much set your own hours. You can work nights. If you're a night owl, you can work evenings, morning, days, work from pretty much wherever. It's really, really fascinating. So yeah, I'd recommend try Hack Me, Hack the Box. GCHQ have got some examples on there. There's others like Immersive Labs, which you may have to pay for. I think they do have some education outreach. Yeah. You can go in and just try it.